Trump ends up being the nominee, which I believe that he will, they are going to burn this country to the fucking ground to keep him out. No rule of law whatsoever. Violent criminals being let out. Our currency isn't worth what it was 3 years ago when we had the best economy we ever had in the history of the United States. Yeah. This is the communist playbook. These people are guilty of real bad shit. And what you don't realize is that not only are these people trying to cover up for the crimes that they committed, they're willing to destroy your household and your life to do so. Would you rather have tyranny and this corruption for the rest of your life? Or would you rather pull the Band-Aid off and rebuild shit the way it's supposed to be?
Hey there, freedom fighters. I'm coming back at you with another one. Today's video topic, the election. Surprise, surprise. That seems to be what everyone's talking about. You know, who would have thought? But, you know, with the election right around the corner coming up, I'm coming at you on Monday afternoon. And it's not tomorrow, but it's the next Tuesday, I'm pretty sure. And haven't made up my mind yet whether I'm going to be participating in the festivities or not. But, you know, regardless, there's going to be a lot of stuff to cover. So that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about, you know, from here on out, even post-election. But, you know, and you already know how I feel about it. Nobody's coming to save us. You know, neither one of them. And regardless of who wins, it's going to be a shit show. And there's going to be lots of news to cover. So, you know, we'll be on that, covering all the angles and stuff like that. But basically what I wanted to talk about here today was in that last video. I think it was we need to start acting like them. And basically what that video was about was, you know, how they're willing to fight dirty, how they're willing to do, you know, whatever. And they're fighting to win. They are playing to win. And it seems like we're just kind of, you know, sitting around like going along for the roller coaster ride. But anyway, you know, I've watched a couple videos here recently that made some good points I kind of wanted to talk about. And in that last video, Italian Hillbilly Kaz wrote that you know, war is inevitable. And, you know, I was saying I 100% agree with that. Because we cannot go on like this. And I've been saying that for years upon years. I can't believe there already hasn't been conflict. And I've gave my opinion on that as well. I know everyone for the longest time have said, like, we're in a cold civil war. And I've even said, you know, we've been in a hot civil war. When you name all these, you know, Baltimore, Kenosha, Berkeley, Ferguson, you know, all the Portland, every other week there was street battles in 2016. And, you know, you have the Rittenhouse event and all this stuff. That one guy got shot in Portland, and there's been a couple, you know, skirmishes and stuff like that. Those are all modern day Civil War battles. But I think what people are saying is a much broader conflict. You know, not the boys getting together on the weekend and beating down some Antifa, or Antifa throwing a couple cocktails, you know, burning down buildings. But, you know, a much deeper involved conflict. And, you know, Kaz was saying that's inevitable. And you know, that's definitely something I agree with. But, you know, I was watching just about everybody in the last week or two had a video out. Tim Pool, oh, surprise, surprise, did a Civil War video with that What If Alt Hist guy. And he's done a couple podcasts where he talks about it. Sean Ryan had a really good podcast recently where he was talking to two guys about, you know, an upcoming civil war in the election. PBD did a Civil War after the election video. But really what I wanted to focus on was this one. Man, I've watched so many videos recently, I can't even remember which one exactly it was. But I think it was maybe Grunt Proof, or I think it was Barrel and Hatchet actually, but it was like the untold horrors of a civil war. And I remember like one of the top comments in that video was the Mel Gibson quote from The Patriot, where it was like, "This war will not be fought on foreign lands. It will be known, by our people. It will be seen by our children's eyes. They will know this war, and the innocents will die, right, beside us." Basically saying, it's gonna affect us all, and within our cities, within our homes, within our states, counties, and localities, and what that brings. And people were talking, in the comments about all different kinds of stuff. And some people who have lived in other countries that experienced civil wars were leaving their comments about things that they've seen, things that happen, famines, starvation, people can't get medicine, uh, all kinds of stuff. And then the horrors, and the fighting that goes in. Another comment in that video I read, which is very true, was, civil wars are always known to be more brutal because, when you're fighting the foreign adversary on their soil or wherever you're at, you're a little more disassociated. You're disattached from the people and the culture. Civil wars are fought with a more, a hatred, a almost like you're looking at your countrymen as no longer your countrymen, as traitors, and you just can't believe it. And that's usually fought with a different kind of hatred, and those wars are always the most brutal. um and what that entails, and what's coming ahead. And I think it was in that Sean Ryan video too, where he was talking to, um I can't even remember who it was, but one of these military guys, and he was talking about all the stuff he did, and the stuff he's seen, and it's just gonna be brutal, man. And there was a Joe Rogan interview too. I think it was with Tim Kennedy, but I can't even remember. Um, but he was saying the same thing. He was like, and he was talking about the ones that he could remember, the kills he had that he remembered the most and stuff like that. And a lot of them were, just, he was like, a lot of times in war, especially it's like long range. He's like, the close quarter combat, the up and personal stuff is the stuff you remember. And he was talking about, like when you're shooting across the freaking desert and you're just lobbing bullets and stuff, that's totally different. But he talked about a time where he actually got into a fight with a guy. I can't remember what he said. Maybe he was out of ammo or something. He went into a building and like pulled out his pistol or something. I can't remember if it got dislodged from his hand or if it was also empty or whatever happened. But he said he ended up getting into a hand to hand fight with this guy, a freaking Taliban or something. And he was like, yeah, he basically went to his knife and like gutted this dude. And he was like, man, that's a whole nother, level. When you're sticking a blade into somebody and looking them in the eyes and watching as they go. And I remember hearing some other guy say something too about the same thing, and he was like, it's a whole different thing when you're like, okay, this guy's the enemy or whatnot, but when it's your countrymen, it's on a whole nother level. But I mean, it's pretty much where we've gotten to. And there was another video too. Like I said, there was so many, but there was I forget his name. I think it's Andy from the Real AF podcast. I don't know if you guys watch him, but he also did another thing. I think I archived or bookmarked that clip or the Joe Rogan interview. I can't remember, but he was also talking about it. I forget exactly what he said, but he's like, are we getting to the point where we just rip the Band-Aid off? Like, we're here, we know all the stuff that's going on, all the corruption, all the evil that's going on. And we either just sit back and continue to allow it all to happen, or, we rip that band aid off. But that band aid is ugly. And, that wound is ugly. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Not many people are, kind of understanding what goes with that. But, this ain't ripping off any normal band aid, right? That what lies underneath is a gaping, infected, rotting wound. And it is worse than, picking a scab or anything. This ain't a band aid on a paper cut. This is a band aid on a bullet wound. And when you rip that thing off, man, there's no going back. And, it's like, I was watching another video where the guy was saying, at the end of this election, again, he was like, either side that wins, neither side is going to accept it. And he kind of went through both scenarios. But if Trump wins, you already know the deal. The left is going to burn down the country. You're going to see BLM and Antifa reemergence. They're going to be out there. And then everyone, again, the right likes to beat their chest and say, oh, yeah, we'll kick their, little 90-pound soy boy ass, out of our state. You know damn well, if you're telling yourself the truth, you know damn well you are lying to yourself. And that if you do anything to their precious brown shirts, you will be getting arrested. You will be going to prison. Your beloved police, you'll find out, real soon that they won't stand for it. There will be no, restoring the constitutional republic. None of that stuff's going to be happening. But, on the vice versa, if Harris wins, again, I don't think the right's going to do anything. But, it's just, maybe Trump this time will actually call for a real insurrection. But I doubt it. I mean, other than, a full, calling to arms. And he has to do it for real this time. Which I'm not sure why he didn't do it last time. But, lead your army, right? Like, you have created and only he can do it. I've said it tons of times. Whether you like him or not, or you believe what he's in, people always tell me, like, oh, why don't you, say something or, advocate for something. I mean, what good is that going to do? What good is it going to do if Freedom Fighter calls for action or tells you to do something with my, 700, 800 followers or something? What are we going to amass? What are we going to do? We're not going to do anything. We're not going to accomplish anything. You're just going to get knocks on the door. So there's no point to that. And even if you had 10,000 followers or 50,000 or 100,000, unless you have 100% attendance rate, if you had 100,000 followers and you could assemble those 100,000 and actually do something and like maybe you could get something done. But it needs to be the scale, of a Donald Trump with 70, 80 million people behind him. And I've also said this, a lot of those 80 million people are boomers. They're not fighting age males. They're not going to be out there doing any of that stuff. Not saying that they're not going to be useful, not that they can't be used in other, applications. They can sure teach. Well, the younger generation has a lot to learn. They can sure help in other ways. But, the people think about the fighting force and everything like that. Another thing, if Trump wins, another thing I heard, which was really crazy, but it made sense, was that, the vice president has to sign off on the election. Like, you remember what Pence did and why we called him Benedict Pence, Traitor Pence, because, he didn't look into the evidence. He didn't hear the people saying, look at what's going on and all this. He just said, no, we have to certify the election, um, and do that. Well, who's the vice president? Do you see Kamala signing over the presidency saying Donald Trump won this fair and legitimately? Or is she just going to refuse to sign it? And are they going to then look at her as Benedict Kamala, traitor Harris, who ended up signing over the election? But I don't think she will. And you remember Senator Jamie Raskin even said, if Trump wins, we got to go in there and say, I forget what they pull whatever amendment, say that he's an insurrectionist, he's a traitor, he can't be president. Then Harris doesn't sign it off, and he said prepare for civil war-like conditions and everybody's going to need bodyguards. So that's where we're at in this country. And it's like everyone, we're at the end where it's the ripping off the Band-Aid stage. And, there was another video of Rogan on one of his podcasts, and I think he was talking to Dr. Phil, or it was one of the doctors, it might have been Dr. Drew or Dr. Oz or one of them, but I forget exactly the context of the discussion, but they were talking about like drugs and stuff like that and drug legalization, all this stuff. And he was like, why don't we just legalize drugs? And I think back to this other interview Ron Paul did a long time ago. Can't remember if it was Ron or Rand, but he was like, what are you afraid of? If you legalize drugs tomorrow, like hard drugs, like meth or heroin, crack, all this stuff. Like, you think like your son or your daughter is just going to go get some meth? Like, oh, it's legal now. You think your mother's just going to become a heroin addict? Grandma's going to go try out some crack, saying, oh, I've always felt like trying that, so now that it's legal, I'm going to go get some. That's not going to happen. The people who are pursuing that, who want to do it, are already doing so. So, they don't care. But the whole point he was getting to was the reason they don't legalize drugs. Well, the corruption in the drug war is a part of it. Because it really is a war on the people. It's meant to, control. And then I've done a video on this before as well. And then they lump in, the felonies and, all that to take away guns and stuff. So again, it's another way to strip the people of their rights. But at the end of the day as well, he was saying like they're going to have to rip the Band-Aid off. And a lot of people would die. And that's what they don't want to do. Because if they said, okay, everyone's free now, we're no longer arresting, people for the usage of this. And again, manufacturing or being a dealer is something totally different. But, general usage, being in possession of small amounts is not a crime. Not on the user level. And a lot of people would die that way. But they already die in huge numbers, so it really wouldn't change anything. But that's what he was saying, like they don't want to rip off that Band-Aid. But at some point, I guess you have to get there. And I'm kind of using that for my analogy today of like, ripping off the Band-Aid. That's probably, there's your title. And what do you think, man? Is that where we're headed? Are we going to rip the Band-Aid off and finally get this thing going, this election? Or, is nothing going to happen again? But let me know what you guys think. As always, like, share, subscribe, do the stuff. And until the next one, we are on our own. Nobody's coming to save us. So get right with God, because only God can save you. Freedom Fighters out.